Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, thanks for those sessions, everybody. It was an interesting 2 hours to say the least. And I got a shout out, so I'll take it at the end. Thanks for that, Matt. Yeah,
Not a
and we
problem.
do have some
Thanks for your previous
questions
work.
from we do have some questions from the audience. I think Morten looks like the most likely candidate for the first one. So are you ready, Morten?
Yes, let's go
All
for it.
right. So the first question from Callum is, with the blob storage provider from cloud going open source, what does that mean for the existing community solution? I'm assuming that means the open source that's been around for a while.
Yeah, the community blob storage provider package. Yeah, well,
Exactly.
we actually had a chat with Jevin, who is one of the maintainers, just I think a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, not too long ago, where we talked about how we could kind of merge our efforts or combine our efforts into the work with the blob storage provider, since we need to create one anyway for Umbraco Cloud. Jevin was thinking about making one, but was hesitant because we have one. So we talked about that for Umbraco 9, that we would just kind of join efforts in an open source package that can benefit all. Since we need to maintain it, then the community can benefit from that as well. So I think for the community one, Jevin and his contributor team will not make an update for V9, but will then point to ours, which can be used outside of cloud as well.
I see. Oh, that's good news, right? Like you said, I think that was one of the original visions of Umbraco Cloud anyways, was that the learnings and the work there would actually also benefit the community and not just the cloud product. So it's good to hear that's actually the case. Yeah. Incidentally, does the current cloud solution use like something like a full access Azure blob connection string, or is it using something more, how about secure?
Yeah,
because I know there's some other options. So.
Yeah. Well, the one that we use today for Umbraco 7 and 8 is based around SAS tokens. Since we use it in a multi-tenant setup, we needed this capability, and that's one of the main reasons and drivers for making our own. So the Umbraco Cloud, or the one for Umbraco 9, will then have there will be two NuGet packages that will come out of that. One which is just the provider itself, and then on top of that, configuration which will then be able to be used for these two different types of scenarios. So either using just a blob storage connection string, or using SAS tokens for a specific container. So you can use it for both approaches. But obviously we recommend the SAS token approach, because then you don't give away your primary key.
Not giving away your primary key to, yep. Okay, that's more good news. Do you have anything comment-wise on that, Matt? Just curious.
No, I've not delved into how Cloud's got their setup yet.
Yeah, that's okay.
Just trust it works.
Yeah, right. It just works. Don't mess with it.
That's the benefit.
I think that next question, though, is one of the points that we brought up, and Matt, that you brought up particularly. So this comes from Soren Kotal. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. So when adding the CS project file to the cloud repository, is this going to open up having business logic and other libraries in the cloud repo as well? So another one for you, Morten.
Yeah, well, I think for at least for the time being, we still recommend using the cloud repository for deployment purposes. So not as a full-blown source repository. And that's also why we want to focus our efforts in the future on that you can bring your own Git repository, so that you can have a true source repository for your Umbraco Cloud site. And then what's deployed is then the artifacts for your website. So I think for starters, we'll still recommend having source control on the side, and then using it as a way to deploy to cloud. But obviously, we need to work out the finer details of exactly how it will work and at what level will the CS project be available so you can include other projects, and what it means for your dependencies, which you install, ideally as NuGet packages, but for stuff which is libraries, we have to figure that out. And that's something that we'll be working on the coming months on that part.
Okay. Would you, Matt and Kimberly, when you ran into kind of that blocker with the cloud repo actually being more of a deployment repo and not really a true source code repo, was that, I mean, were you ready just to walk away from it, or were you committed to finding a solution?
We did consider it. It was a very quick, large blocker. It became very, very quickly available that we couldn't just pick up cloud and run with it like we would a normal project.
Yeah.
But we sunk a little bit of time into investigation. The advantages of cloud were beneficial enough that we really did want to make it work. So I'm glad we found a solution that fits us. And again, I'm glad Umbraco are also making proactive moves to really support that more completely in the future as well.
I think with the feature potential for the feature branches and those environments, that's got great potential for doing things like having targeting multiple different versions of Umbraco, so you can make sure everything's like you expect it to be. Yeah, I think that's something that I know even way back when I worked at Umbraco HQ, Morten and I used to talk about how we could make feature branches work. In fact, Morten, you actually had a solution for a while, didn't you, for local feature branches in using Umbraco Cloud? Yeah,
we did, but it's kind of a hidden feature. But yeah, but it was mainly to so you had a way when you switch branches that you would get another local database. But the limitation of that was that it only worked with SQL CE, at least for starters. So yeah, it was more of an experiment than anything else.
Sure, understood.
Going back to, I
yeah,
just
go
want to
ahead,
add
Kimberly.
what Matt said, which is, I think for us, part of the reason that we had the opportunity to push through and spend a little bit more time looking at Umbraco Cloud was the client that we first considered Umbraco Cloud for was coming off of another sort of completely hosted solution with automated updates and things like that. So they were already used to having a package that gave them sort of a clear-cut set of capabilities that was managed by the creators of the software platform. So they sort of wanted a like for like, even though they wanted to move to Umbraco. So that gave us sort of that little extra push to spend a little more time looking at this and figuring out a solution.
Gotcha.
I was certainly eternally a big proponent of Umbraco Deploy, being able to get over the content synchronization between environments, both in terms of your doc types going up and your content coming down. A big win for developer time, in my opinion.
For sure. Yeah, let's ask Andy. Should we ask Andy a question? Okay, here's one for you, Andy. So this is from Craig Stevens, who's I know had some less than awesome experience with his initial sort of go at Umbraco Deploy. So his question is, will deploy on cloud work if I delete items picked in, say, like a list picker or a media picker? If I then try and deploy forward, say I deploy from dev to staging, my content editor deletes some images that I have in the deploy, and then they try and deploy forward to the next environment. I think that's what he's trying to get at there.
Yeah, well, I haven't explicitly tried that, but as far as I know, that should work. I mean, Craig's right. I saw his comments in the chat as well. He's obviously used it over a number of years. And over that time, I mean, long before I joined Umbraco, these edge cases have got caught, and we're still finding some. There was one recently I was looking at where a macro parameter was being deleted that then caused some issues with synchronization. So there's still issues to flush out around that. But generally, yes. I mean, the Umbraco Deploy depends on certain things, and deliberately so. You can't deploy content without the schema of the document type matching up. But the things that aren't necessary, it should skip over and work correctly. So if that's not the case, as I say, I haven't tried that explicit scenario. I should say we have a dedicated issue tracker now for deploy. So it's at the usual GitHub address, but under umbraco.deploy.issues. So if Craig or anyone wants to raise specifics like that, we can certainly dig into them. And yeah, we'll obviously do our best to solve them. I mean, one of the changes now, obviously, we do have people who are dedicated to the commercial products, which is really just deploying forms. So hopefully, if there are any issues, we can solve them.
Interesting. So would you want to, I guess it seems like you'd want the deploy to fail if there was some dependency that wasn't there. If that's
Well,
just
this is often the interesting scenario. This is something I'm finding, actually, that there are some very clear-cut cases. Change the topic slightly, but it's also related. But with Umbraco data, it's kind of very clear with some things who should be managing it. So document types is clearly developers. Content rather is clearly editors. But there are things that fall between those stools. So forms is an example. You know, a developer's going to create them, or our editors. It'll be different for different people. And we have options for that, but we don't at the moment for dictionary items. And this came up quite recently, that developers want to create dictionary items, but editors want to update them, and that can cause some issues. So yeah, with all these scenarios, you've got to think quite carefully as to, you know, what is the right thing to do in this scenario. Is it a block? Is it a silent skip over, or is it a warning? Mm-hmm. So yeah, we'll need a little bit of thought.
Yeah, it's deployment with Umbraco has always been complicated, right? From back in the days when we used to write scripts to deploy our SQL database, because that's how you did it. Yeah.
So, no, exactly. I'm back from the days when I started. It was just do it all again quickly on production. That was
do what you
it's good to know there are tools to support this.
Yeah. So it's and there are you know, just to call out, there are some great options for deployment right now in Umbraco. Obviously, if you're on cloud, you're going to use the cloud version of deploy because that's what's baked in and optimized. But if you're on premises or have another hosting provider, there are options, and it's really nice to see that I think in the Umbraco ecosystem, that you have choices now. You're not locked into just one particular solution. And certainly those script posts that from a few years back that Kimberly and Matt alluded to were right at ProWorks. We were really committed to making it work for us, and we went long way around our elbow to get to our thumb to make it work at that time. But it worked, and now it's providing inspiration for other folks, and hopefully someone's going to crack it at some point, and it's actually going to be like the best way to do it. Yeah, I hope, anyways. I'm waiting for that. Well, I'll let you last this one, Kimberly, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure. I'm like so engrossed in the conversation. I'm missing what the questions are over here. Yeah. Are there any plans to use deploy as a way of deploying or installing Umbraco packages? Seems like a natural fit. Oh, that's a question from you, Paul.
That's my question.
Yeah, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can answer that to some extent. I don't think deploy, but there's definitely conversations at the moment around how we're going to handle this for version 9. I don't know if people have been following the discussion, and there'll be other sessions where we can dig into this some more, but how packages will work in V9 will be slightly different in that we expect they will need to be deployed by NuGet rather than being employed by the back office. But one of the things related to that is the kind of the data that needs to come with packages when you want to install content, when you want to potentially install your own database tables. So we're looking at a model of kind of package migrations. So it's not really deploy, but Umbraco itself will be able to handle that, such that when you install a package via NuGet, it can then pick up and make those changes in the environment that it's installed in. But then in the later stages, it will get pushed forward by deploy or by whatever usync or whatever you're using to go into later environments. So yeah, as I say, not specifically deploy, but that is something we are working on at the moment for V9.
Great. Yeah, I think the discussion around NuGet would be something I'm looking forward to attending those sessions, because the developer part of me is like, yes, NuGet, that's awesome. And then the other side of me is like, what does that mean for all that other stuff that we used to do via package actions and other things? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good. Here's one for Kristian. How about if you want to pay by American Express, like a lot of corporate businesses do around the world, but especially in North America? Any chance that's going to be supported sometime soon?
I cannot say anything about timing, but we have been looking into it, and it is one of the it's one of the it was one of the things that was mentioned from our what's it called, financial department called Fish Tank. That was one requirement we wanted to look at some point, and we have been doing initial talks with providers in Denmark. So yes, but I don't know when.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. I think a related question from Carl Tyne is, what about VAT numbers? And say you don't have one of those because you're in UK or you're not a business. Is that something that there'll be a workaround for, or is that just outside of the scope of what Umbraco can do?
Okay, so we're moving into some law territory here, so I just have to be very careful what I say and promise. But VAT or corporate registration number is something that we are by law required to get from our customers as long as they're within EU. So if you are a company in a EU country, we have to get your VAT ID. If you are a country that is not in the EU, which I believe England is not after Brexit, then we are not required to get your VAT ID, and that will be handled in the new purchase flow. So if you choose England as your country, you will not be required to put in a VAT ID.
Carefully worded, thank you. What else looks interesting to talk about?
You're not suggesting there's a benefit to Brexit, are you?
I didn't say anything one way or the other. All I just asked the question.
Well, I think I'm actually interested in I guess two of the questions that are at the top of our document for Martin, about will Umbraco take advantage of Azure paired regions? That came from Colin Anderson, and I'll just ask them both at the same time. Paul, you asked about why US East and not US Central, and whether or not that was a conscious decision. So I'm always interested in Azure infrastructure choices.
Yeah, well, so I think for the US East one, that's we looked at the regions which are the most mature in Azure in the US, and then trying to find some kind of middle ground. So right now we're leaning towards US East, but I mean it's not set in stone yet. So if you have a good reason for us choosing another region first, then we are all ears. But right now we are leaning towards US East. Based off of maturity in the Azure data centers and the services which are supported there. So mostly going from a perspective of maturity from Azure data centers. The ones that are pretty well expanded in terms of reach and such, yeah.
Sounds like it is a conscious decision then. That's good.
Yeah, we didn't flip a coin. And then you asked something around paired regions. I'm not sure I got the question.
Yeah, about paired regions. So,
is that the question? Paired regions?
Yeah, so that Colin asked.
The question here, all it says is, will Umbraco take advantage of Azure paired regions? I'm not sure whether they're talking about pairing within a region or having pairs in other regions, but
yeah. Well, I assume that it's for the running website that they're asking about. And I mean, for starters, our focus is on making the region available, and then we expand from there. So the first step is for us to kind of be able to package Umbraco Cloud in a way so we can expand to multiple regions. But it from the beginning, it will be that the cloud website itself will be within that one region. So from day one, there will not be like failover options or failover regions or paired regions in that regard. But that's something we can look at in the future if there's a real demand for it. So yeah, expanding from there, first make it available and then expand on it if there's something we can do in terms of failover or resiliency or even scaling options. And balancing load. That's something we're interested in, but it really depends on if there's a demand for it.
Of course.
What's the best way to register sort of that interest, whether it's in regions or scaling, or those things? What's the best way to get that feedback to the team?
I think it's the email our CTO, gmo@umbraco.com. I think that's the best option, right? Or products@umbraco.com.
Yep.
Along those
Great.
lines. Or ping him on Twitter or
just
Slack.
like email once a day or
Yeah,
twice a
exactly.
day, like
That
okay.
that should give you some attention. I'm sure he'll love that I say this.
Righto. Here's a good question from Benjamin Karleski at ProWorks around Umbraco Deploy for Andy. With Deploy, will we get the ability to delete doc types and data types through using the deploy process? So he says when they're refactoring, they often do this, and manually having to repeat all those steps in each environment becomes problematic or potentially problematic. How's that?
Yeah, well, but it is an overhead. If you delete something, you do have to then go through the other environments to do that, because Deploy doesn't currently do any deletes, and that's a deliberate kind of conscious choice. I'm not sure I'm ever going to be brave enough to write the code that does deletes.
You don't want yours on that commit.
So I sort of feel that's a good decision, just to be on the safe side. Yeah. There's always obviously dangers with deletes, because there's there could be, but it's unlikely there's a rollback scenario in that situation. So Umbraco Deploy consciously took the decision not to do deletes, and there's no plans currently to change that.
Maybe there's something you could add in and you have to like have a separate user agreement or something. You sign up.
Yeah,
for
maybe like that. Lots of confirmation boxes or something.
Yeah.
Requires a custom
That's only in the
enterprise
free
plan.
version of Umbraco Deploy. Yeah. Well, so here's a question for Kimberly and Matthew. Sounded like initially I was wondering, because you were describing how you had your controllers and your extensions and other like compiled code in the web solution, and then figured out that wasn't really the way you wanted to go. But you looked at the Umbraco kind of recommended approach where they have this core project, right? But that didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is because the web project itself is not really a true source code repository, but more of a deployment repository, or was there
because
more to it?
the web project itself is really just that deployment repository.
I see.
So whilst it's still a valid way of working, it doesn't really fit in with our team's way of working. You could just lift and shift wherever you wanted into that, and that would not go through our pull request process. You could review the commits against that, but again, if it's just DLL updates, there's really no visibility on what that is. A potential for human error when you do that manual deployment process.
Sure.
So
you ran that
automated where possible.
I got you. So you ran the UAAS.cmd and got started, and then went, oh no, this isn't right. So
yeah,
that's probably my favorite feature of cloud, though. In the organization I'm with now, we're very small. So we have a super small web team with like one developer and a few content people, and I love it because it's the perfect fit for us. And for every new person I onboard, I just say run the script, and then they're up and running without having to mess with anything. But of course, in an agency situation, that's not always going to be the case. So understood.
Yeah, it certainly gets you up and going quick. It's comprehensive. It just didn't align with our process, was the flaw in that for us.
Got it. What else? Any other comments from Morten or Kristian that you guys wanted to make sure?
Any comment from us? Well, I don't know. I mean, like we can say in terms of what we talked about today with Umbraco Cloud, is that we really focused on making incremental improvements to the platform. And so the journey that we're on right now is a pretty big undertaking for us internally, because we are essentially rebuilding the entire platform
Right.
in 6 months. But it's all with the purpose of being able to do more and add more features in the future. So even though when we switch to this new platform, you won't really see any changes on Umbraco Cloud, at least not from day one. But the interesting part is that within what we can build on top of that, like what we can do with Umbraco 9, for example, would have been fairly difficult to do in our old setup.
Right.
So it opens up for a lot more options, and especially with the flexible environments is something that that we can easily do in the future, because as we are building this new platform, we are incorporating like little bits of flexibility throughout, which we can utilize in the future. So yeah, there'll be at least some incremental improvements going forward, and then if you saw my talk for the later stage, that's where we can start making some of the bigger splashes in the water, at least, because our intention is to make it a lot more flexibility, or add a lot more flexibility than what we have today, and make it a lot easier to work with Umbraco Cloud, and a lot more enjoyable from a developer perspective. That's also why we have focused a lot on thinking about what we can improve in terms of developer experience and adding continuous integration, because we know that the flow that we have now is not optimal, and we know that it won't work for Umbraco 9 because of how .NET Core works, and how the build output or the artifacts or publish output from that is different than it is in the .NET framework. So there's some changes we're making there which will benefit all types of projects going forward, and especially the CI/CD will be. I think that will be a pretty big step for us, and something that'll make it a lot more enjoyable to work with.
Yeah, I have to agree.
And then also get out of the way of, or not get out of the way, but adding the option for you to control more, be more in control of the flow, and using the tools that you want to use. Like whether if you're hosting your code on GitHub, then that's what you use. If you're hosting your code in Azure repos, then that's what you use, and use the tools that you're used to. So you don't have to specifically use what Umbraco has told you to use, for example, but use the tools that you're used to, and then integrate with that, and just make it part of your tool belt. That's my comment. Do you have a comment?
I don't think I can fill out that many minutes, but along the same lines as Morten is talking about, we're trying to build Umbraco Cloud better, and Morten's talking a lot about the developer experience. Well, what I talked about was more like what is it that's on top of everything that Morten just described, and we're also putting a lot of time and effort into making that better. So better project management, better overview of your projects, better ways to handle your payment, your user management, and everything. So we are, and that is again slowly incremented and slowly getting better. So to continue what Morten said, we are building it better under and over everything. So better for developers, better for project managers,
and for agencies.
And for agencies as well.
Using the cloud portal.
Yeah, using Umbraco Cloud. Yep.
That was our comments. Maybe what about Andy? Maybe Andy has comments. Oh, we're out of time for comments, I'm told. Okay. Oh, so yeah, we lost Paul apparently. I'm told so, or his sound at least. We can't hear Paul. Sorry, Paul. You'll have to write it on sticky notes or do sign language. But so I think from us, we will say thank you for all of the questions, and thank you for attending this Unconference session. And again, if you have more questions, then you're more than welcome to reach out to us, to myself, Morten@umbraco.com, or Kristian. I don't know if you want to give away your email.
I already did my talk.
Okay,
it's kec@umbraco.dk.
Yeah, we're just handing out emails. So. We're open for questions, not recruiters.
Yes.
And should we give Andy's email out as well?
Sure, why not?
No. Oh, he can do that himself if he wants to. But so I don't know what the time is, but thank you all for watching, and I think that's a wrap.